In the mansion of a powerful businessman, silence holds more than just secrets. It hides lethal intentions. An elderly woman begins to mysteriously waste away while her son's fiancé takes absolute control of the house. But an invisible employee sees what no one else does, and she may be the only one who can stop a perfect crime. If this story caught your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. Let's get into it. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear. The Miller Mansion stood like a monument of stone and glass in the heart of the Upper East Side in New York City. 3 stories of calculated elegance, gardens that looked like they were ripped from the pages of international magazines, and a garage that housed cars whose values could feed entire families for years. But behind that flawless facade, between the Italian marble hallways and the imported silk curtains, there were secrets that all the money in the world couldn't buy or conceal. Claire Davis was 38 and had worked in that house for nearly a decade. Her steps were silent, her movements precise, her presence almost imperceptible. She would wake before sunrise in her small studio apartment in Queens, take a bus and then the subway to reach the wealthy neighborhood and enter through the service entrance, as was expected of someone in her position. Never through the main gate, never along the same paths the owners walked. She had learned early on that there are spaces in the world not meant for people like her, and the Miller Mansion reinforced that lesson every single day. She knew every corner of that house better than the owners themselves. She knew the hardwood floor on the 2nd story creaked on the 4th step, that the library window jammed on humid days, that the dining room chandelier had a perpetually burnt-out bulb that no one bothered to change. Claire saw everything, heard everything, but she had mastered the art of being invisible, not by choice but by necessity. It was how women like her survived in places like that. Edward Miller was the kind of man who walked into a room and expected everyone to stop what they were doing and pay attention. At 42, the heir to an empire built on investment funds and stakes in dozens of companies, he carried on his shoulders the weight of a last name that opened doors and closed deals. Tall, with broad shoulders and black hair always impeccably combed back, Edward had the gaze of someone accustomed to giving orders and watching the world bend to his whims. He treated the house the way he treated his business, with absolute control. Every employee had their specific role, their rigid schedules, their unbreakable rules. Claire was the housekeeper. She was to clean, organize, and disappear. She wasn't allowed to speak unless spoken to. She couldn't move through the rooms when the family was present. She didn't exist beyond her practical utility. But if Edward was cold and calculating, his fiancée was something else entirely. Veronica Costello was 29, with a beauty that was paralyzing. Straight blonde hair cascaded to her waist, green eyes that sparkled under any light, a body sculpted in luxury gyms, and skin that looked like it had never seen a day of hard work. She was a social media influencer, as she called herself, with over 2 million followers. She posted photos on yachts, trips to Dubai, dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants. Her life was a carefully curated showcase designed to inspire envy and admiration. Veronica had entered Edward's life a year and a half ago at a gala hosted by a business magazine. She was there as the guest of an older businessman, but one look at Edward was all it took for her to understand that this was something much bigger than a simple relationship. This was power. This was a last name worth more than any advertising contract. This was the key to a world she had always wanted, but could never afford on her own. The marriage proposal came 6 months later in Paris, at the top of the Eiffel Tower, with photographers hired to capture every second. Social media exploded. The tabloids ran stories. The whole world seemed to celebrate the perfect love between the powerful businessman and the stunning woman. But inside the Upper East Side mansion, anyone watching closely saw a different story being written. Claire noticed. She always noticed. She saw how Veronica's posture changed when she was alone, how her smile vanished the moment the cameras were off, how she treated the staff with a disdain that bordered on cruelty. One day Claire was cleaning the living room when Veronica walked in on the phone, talking loudly about the renovations she would make to the house as soon as she was married. She didn't even look at Claire. She just kept talking, as if she were part of the furniture. "I'm going to change everything. This decor is old, outdated. I want something modern, something that makes a statement. And I'm going to cut down on staff. Why have so many people wandering around the house? We can just hire a cleaning service to come once a week. And that's it. Claire pretended not to hear, but every word was etched into her memory. She knew her job was on the line. She knew Veronica saw them all, the long-time employees, as remnants of a past she wanted to erase. But Claire couldn't lose this job. It was her livelihood, the support for her 15-year-old daughter, Julia, who attended a public school in the Bronx and dreamed of going to medical school. That salary paid for the rent, the utilities, the school supplies. Losing that job meant losing everything. But there was someone in the house Veronica couldn't control so easily. Mrs. Martha Miller, Edward's mother, was 73 and possessed a frighteningly sharp mind. She lived on the 3rd floor of the mansion, in a spacious suite overlooking the garden. Mrs. Martha was different. She greeted the staff by name, asked about their families, thanked them for their work. She treated Claire with a kindness that reminded her of her own mother, who was no longer in this world. Mrs. Martha had been a widow for 5 years. Her husband, the patriarch of the Miller family, had built the empire from scratch, and she had been by his side every step of the way. She knew the behind-the-scenes of the business, the strategies, the alliances, but she also knew the price they had paid for it all. That's why when Edward introduced Veronica as his future wife, Mrs. Martha couldn't hide her concern. "Edward, are you sure about this?" she had asked one afternoon as they had tea on the veranda. Claire was nearby, changing the flowers in a vase, and overheard the conversation. "Mom, I know what I'm doing," Edward replied impatiently. "Veronica is the perfect woman. Smart, beautiful, well-connected. She'll be a great wife." "She's all of those things, I have no doubt," Mrs. Martha said, her soft voice carrying decades of wisdom. "But have you noticed how she looks at people, how she treats those beneath her? That says a lot about a person's character, Edward." "You're seeing things that aren't there," he retorted, standing up. "Veronica is a modern, determined woman. She's not like the women of your generation, Mom. The world has changed." Mrs. Martha didn't press the issue. She knew her son well enough to know that once he made a decision, he rarely went back on it. But the worry continued to grow inside her like a shadow. As the weeks passed, Veronica's presence in the mansion became more and more constant. She would arrive in the morning, stay until late at night, participate in business meetings alongside Edward, and offer her opinions on corporate decisions. She was establishing herself, marking her territory. And the closer she got to the center of power, the more Mrs. Martha became an obstacle. Claire noticed the subtle changes. Veronica started making comments about how Mrs. Martha was tired, stressed, in need of special care. She suggested new doctors, alternative treatments, changes to her routine. Edward, absorbed by his business and blinded by infatuation, agreed with everything. After all, Veronica seemed so concerned, so dedicated to the well-being of her future mother-in-law. One day, Claire was tidying Mrs. Martha's room when the older woman asked to speak with her. She closed the door, sat in the armchair by the window, and looked at Claire with an intensity that made her stop everything she was doing. "Claire, how long have you been here?" Mrs. Martha asked. "Almost 10 years, Mrs. Martha." 10 years? You've seen so much in this house, haven't you? You saw Edward grow in his business. You saw the transformations, the comings and goings of people." Claire nodded, unsure where this conversation was headed. "Then you must have noticed the recent changes, her presence, the way things are being reorganized." "Mrs. Martha, Claire hesitated, not knowing if she should continue. "You can speak freely, my dear. Here, between these walls, you can speak." Claire took a deep breath. "I do notice, yes, things are different. The house is different." Mrs. Martha smiled, but it was a sad smile. "I don't trust her, Claire. I know I shouldn't speak this way about my future daughter-in-law, but it's the truth. There's something about her that makes me uneasy, something my mother's heart recognizes as danger. But Edward won't listen to me. He's bewitched. Mr. Edward is a grown man, Mrs. Martha. He must know what he's doing." "He should," she agreed, but her tone made it clear she didn't believe it. But I'd like you to do something for me, Claire. I'd like you to keep your eyes open. Watch. You have a knack for being present without being noticed. Use it. If anything strange happens, if you notice anything out of the ordinary, tell me, please." A chill ran down Claire's spine. This wasn't just a casual request. It was a cry for help disguised as a conversation. Mrs. Martha was afraid, and for the first time in all her years working in that house, Claire started to feel afraid too. The following weeks brought even more obvious changes. Veronica began going up to the third floor frequently, always carrying trays with tea, medications, and supplements she claimed were essential for Mrs. Martha's health. Edward approved of the initiative, praising his fiancée's dedication. Claire, however, noticed that after each of Veronica's visits, Mrs. Martha became more tired, more drowsy, more confused. "I'm not feeling well, Claire," Mrs. Martha confessed one afternoon as Claire was changing the sheets. "My head feels heavy. I have memory lapses. I forget things I've just done. It's like I'm wrapped in a constant fog." "Have you spoken to your doctor?" Veronica brought a new doctor, a specialist, she said. "He told me it's normal, that it's the stress of aging, that I need more rest, more pills to help me sleep better. But I don't remember agreeing to this. I don't remember asking for a new doctor." Claire's stomach tightened. Something was deeply wrong. That same evening while cleaning Edward's first-floor office, Claire heard voices coming from the adjacent library. The door was ajar. It was Veronica on the phone, speaking softly, but not softly enough. "Everything's under control. She's getting more docile every day. The doctor is doing exactly what we agreed. In a few weeks, Edward will have total control over the decisions, and I'll have total control over Edward." There was a pause. The person on the other end must have been talking. "No, she doesn't suspect a thing. She thinks she's just tired. Perfect, isn't it? By the wedding, everything will be settled. No one will question anything. And if they do, we'll have medical reports, all official, all flawless." Claire backed away from the door in silence, her heart pounding so hard she feared someone might hear it. Her hands were trembling. She had just heard something she shouldn't have, something that completely changed the dynamics of that house. Veronica wasn't taking care of Mrs. Martha. She was doing something to her, something calculated, cold, and meticulously planned. And for the first time in all those years of invisibility, Claire realized she might be the only person who could do something about it. But what could a housekeeper do against such powerful people? How could someone like her stand up to an empire of money and influence? As she rode the crowded subway back home that night, crossing the city, Claire looked at the lights of New York City flickering in the darkness. The immense city, full of lives that intersected and ignored each other. She was just one among millions, an anonymous worker who cleaned the floors of important people. But inside her, something was beginning to shift. A quiet certainty that, invisible or not, she could not remain silent in the face of what she was seeing. Mrs. Martha had asked for her help. She had trusted her. And Claire, who had accepted her position of invisibility her entire life, now faced a choice. She could continue to pretend she didn't see, didn't hear, didn't exist. Or she could risk everything to protect the only person in that mansion who treated her with dignity. When she got home, Julia was studying at the small kitchen table, surrounded by books and notebooks. She looked up and smiled at her mother. That smile was the reason Claire woke up every day, took a bus and a subway, and cleaned floors that other people dirtied. Everything was for that smile, for the future she wanted to secure for her daughter. "Mum, are you okay?" Julia asked, noticing something different in Claire's eyes. "I'm fine, honey. Just a long day." But as she prepared dinner, Claire knew that lie wouldn't last long. Soon she would have to make a decision, and that decision could change everything. For her, for Julia, for Mrs. Martha, for everyone. The Miller mansion held secrets, and Claire Davis, the invisible woman, was about to find out just how far those secrets could go, and just how far she herself was willing to go to bring them to light. The following days brought an increasingly heavy routine. Claire would arrive at the mansion and immediately feel the dense atmosphere hanging over the hallways. Veronica was always present, like a queen in her castle, giving orders, rearranging spaces, firing long-time employees, and bringing in new people who answered only to her. The cook, who had worked there for 15 years, was let go without notice. The gardener, who knew every plant in that immense garden, was replaced by a landscaping company. Slowly, everyone connected to the old structure of the house was being eliminated. Everyone except Claire, for now. Edward was increasingly absent. Endless meetings, business trips, commitments that kept him away from home for days at a time. And when he was there, he seemed like a different man. Tired, irritable, making hasty decisions that made no sense. Claire would overhear his phone conversations while cleaning the office. Risky investments, abrupt changes to contracts, partnerships being dissolved. It was as if someone was planting ideas in his head, and he no longer had the clarity to distinguish right from wrong. Veronica, on the other hand, was flourishing. Her social media showcased a life of intensified glamour, photos in the mansion, videos showing the wedding preparations, partnerships with luxury brands. She was building a personal empire on the back of the Miller name, and Edward seemed not to notice he was being used as a platform. But what worried Claire the most was Mrs. Martha's condition. The older woman had deteriorated significantly. She rarely left her room. When Claire went up to clean the third floor, she would find Mrs. Martha sitting in her armchair, staring out at the garden with empty eyes, as if lost in thought she couldn't organize. Her speech was slower, her hands trembled slightly, and there were moments when she didn't recognize Claire immediately. "Who are you?" she asked one day, her voice weak. "It's me, Mrs. Martha, Claire. I've worked here for 10 years, remember?" It took a few seconds for Mrs. Martha's eyes to focus, but when she finally recognized Claire, they filled with tears. "Claire, yes. I'm sorry, my dear. My head is so foggy. I don't know what's real and what isn't anymore. I'm losing myself." Claire knelt beside the armchair and held Mrs. Martha's cold hand. "You're not losing anything. Someone is doing this to you, I know, I heard." Mrs. Martha looked at her with a mixture of fear and hope. "You heard? What?" "Veronica, she's manipulating everything, the medicine, the doctors, the decisions. She wants total control, and you're in her way." Tears streamed down Mrs. Martha's wrinkled face. "I knew it. Deep down, I always knew. But Edward doesn't believe me. He thinks I'm getting senile, that I'm imagining things. Veronica convinced him of it, and now I can't even think straight to defend myself. You need to stop taking those pills." "I can't. Veronica brings them herself. She stays here until I take them. She says it's for my own good, that Edward would be very upset if I didn't follow the treatment, and I don't want to worry my son. He already has so many problems." Claire felt a wave of helplessness. How could she help someone being held prisoner in her own home, in her own body? How could she fight such a well-constructed system, where every piece fit perfectly to keep the charade going? That night Claire couldn't sleep. She lay awake in her small studio, staring at the ceiling, thinking through all the possibilities. If she reported it, who would believe her? A housekeeper against a millionaire influencer and a powerful businessman. She had no concrete proof, only conversations she'd overheard, observations she'd made. In their world, her word was worth nothing. But what if she could get proof? What if she could document what was happening? Photograph the unlabeled medicine bottles Veronica left in Mrs. Martha's room, record the suspicious conversations? It would be risky. If she were caught, she'd lose her job at best. At worst, she could face much more severe consequences. Julia was asleep in the next room, breathing peacefully, oblivious to her mother's dilemma. Claire looked at the ajar door, saw her daughter's silhouette under the simple sheets, and thought of everything she had built with so much effort. She couldn't put it all at risk. But she also couldn't turn her back on Mrs. Martha, not after years of kindness, respect, and dignity from that woman. The decision came like a whisper in her heart. She would help. She would find a way, even if it meant putting her own safety on the line. Because some battles have to be fought, even when the chances of winning seem impossible. And Claire Davis, the invisible woman everyone ignored, was about to prove that being invisible could also be a powerful weapon, because those who aren't seen can see everything, and those who see everything can eventually change everything. The morning arrived with a light rain that covered New York City like a grey veil. Claire woke up early, earlier than usual, with a tight feeling in her chest and a new determination pulsing through her veins. As she made coffee for herself and Julia, her thoughts kept returning to Mrs. Martha, to that lost gaze, to those trembling hands that could no longer hold a cup without spilling. Something had to be done. And if no one else would do it, then she would. After dropping Julia off at school, Claire took the usual bus and subway to the Upper East Side. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained overcast, as if the city itself sensed that something was about to happen. When she arrived at the mansion through the service entrance, as usual, she found the kitchen empty. The new cook, a young woman Veronica had hired, hadn't arrived yet. Better that way. Claire preferred the solitude for what she was about to do. She went up the service stairs to the third floor with her cleaning cart, just as she did every day. But this time, she carried something extra in her uniform pocket, her cell phone. It was a simple old device, but it had a camera, and that was all she needed right now. The door to Mrs. Martha's room was ajar. Claire knocked lightly before entering. "Mrs. Martha, I'm here to clean." There was no answer. Claire went in and found the older woman still asleep, or in a state that looked like sleep, but was something deeper, heavier. She was breathing slowly, with difficulty, as if each breath required immense effort. Beside the bed, on the nightstand, was a tray with last night's teacup, still half full, and 3 medicine bottles. None of them had a label. Claire glanced down the hallway, making sure she was alone. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her own ears. With trembling hands, she took out her phone and photographed the bottles, the tray, the cup. Then she opened the nightstand drawer where she knew Mrs. Martha kept her personal documents. Inside she found prescriptions, all signed by the new doctor Veronica had brought in, Dr. Henry Taylor, a name Claire had never heard before. The prescriptions called for dangerously high doses of sedatives, anti-anxiety meds and sleeping pills, amounts that seemed excessive, even to a layperson like her. She photographed everything, every prescription, every medication name, every signature. Then she put everything back exactly as it was. She couldn't leave a trace. If Veronica found out someone was investigating, the consequences would be disastrous. As she cleaned the room in silence, Claire watched Mrs. Martha sleep. This woman, once so strong, so present, was now reduced to a shadow of her former self. And all for greed. All because someone wanted to take what wasn't theirs, to manipulate what they had no right to touch. When she finished cleaning and went down to the second floor, Claire heard voices coming from Edward's office. It was him and Veronica, arguing about papers, power of attorney, contracts. Claire slowed her pace, trying to catch something without looking like she was eavesdropping. "Honey, you need to sign these documents today," Veronica was saying, in that sweet voice she used when she wanted something. "They're just formalities to make things easier after we're married. That way you don't have to worry about bureaucracy. I'll take care of everything." "Veronica, I don't know. It's a lot of documents. A broad power of attorney. This gives me access to everything, but it also gives you access to everything. My lawyer said I should be more careful." "Your lawyer doesn't trust me?" Her voice changed, became sharper. "Edward, we're getting married. We're going to build a life together. It doesn't make sense for you to have secrets from me, unless you don't trust me. Is that it?" There was a pause. Claire imagined Edward in there, pressured, tired, confused. "That's not it. Of course I trust you. It's just that—" "It's just what? I'm here by your side, taking care of your mother, organizing our life, and you still doubt me. After everything we've been through." Okay, I'll sign. You're right, I'm sorry." Claire heard the sound of papers shuffling, of a pen scratching. She felt a chill. Veronica was succeeding. She was taking control of everything, piece by piece, document by document. And Edward, blinded by what he thought was love, was handing it all over on a silver platter. Later, when Veronica left for a meeting with brand partners, Claire took the opportunity to go back up to the third floor. This time, Mrs. Martha was awake, sitting in the armchair by the window, looking at the garden with that distant gaze. But when she saw Claire, Her eyes gained a little life. "Claire, you came back." "I always come back, Mrs. Martha. How are you feeling today?" "Confused, tired. My body doesn't seem to obey me anymore. And my head, it's like it's full of cotton. I can't organize my thoughts." Claire closed the door behind her and came closer. "Mrs. Martha, I need you to listen to me carefully. I photographed the pills on your table, the prescriptions. I'm going to try to find out what these medications do, if the doses are correct. But to do that, I need help from someone who understands these things." "You're going to do that for me?" "I am. But I need you to be strong. I need you to resist. Don't take all the pills Veronica brings you. Pretend you took them, but throw them away when she's not looking. Can you do that?" Mrs. Martha looked at her own trembling hands. "I don't know if I can. She stays here until I swallow, watches my every move. Then hide it under your tongue, or pretend to swallow and spit it out later. Anything, Mrs. Martha, but you have to stop taking this. These drugs are destroying you." Tears streamed down Mrs. Martha's face. "I'm so scared, Claire. Scared she'll hurt Edward. Scared she'll destroy everything we built. And scared I won't be strong enough to stop it. You don't have to do this alone. I'm here. We're going to find out the truth and we're going to expose everything, but I need time. I need more solid proof." Mrs. Martha squeezed Claire's hand with surprising strength. "Thank you, my dear. You're the only person I can trust right now." When Claire left the room, she felt the weight of that responsibility on her shoulders. She wasn't a detective. She wasn't a lawyer. She had no resources. She was just a housekeeper with an old cell phone and a determination that grew with each passing day. But she was all Mrs. Martha had. And that would have to be enough. That night, after returning home and having dinner with Julia, Claire waited until her daughter was asleep to do something she never imagined she would. She created a fake social media profile and started researching Dr. Henry Taylor. She found his professional profile, a private practice in Midtown, and recommendations that seemed too good to be true. But when she dug a little deeper, she found something interesting. There were old comments from years ago on medical discussion forums where his name was mentioned negatively, something about questionable practices, dubious prescriptions. The posts had been deleted, but Claire managed to find some traces through old searches. It wasn't much, but it was something, a thread to pull. In the following days, Claire intensified her surveillance. She watched Veronica's every move, every visit to Mrs. Martha's room, every phone call, and the more she watched, the more patterns she identified. Veronica had a fixed schedule for going up to the third floor, every day at 10 in the morning and 8 at night. She always brought the same tray, with tea and the medicine bottles. She would stay for about 15 minutes and leave with a satisfied smile on her face. Claire started writing everything down in an old notebook she kept hidden in her purse. Dates, times, medications, conversations. She was building a file, a timeline that proved there was a pattern, a system in operation. It wasn't a coincidence, it was a plan. One afternoon, while cleaning the living room, Claire heard the doorbell ring. She went to the door and was met by a man in a suit, around 50, carrying a briefcase. He asked for Edward. Claire led him to the office and returned to her tasks, but kept her ears open. "Mr. Miller, I need to talk to you about the recent changes in your investments. Some of these decisions don't make sense. We're losing money on risky operations we would never make under normal circumstances." "Robert, I know what I'm doing." "With all due respect, sir, it doesn't seem like it. Are these orders coming from someone else? Because they're not yours. I've known your style for 15 years, and this isn't you. Veronica has been helping me. She has a modern, innovative vision." "Veronica?" "Sir, she has no background in finance, and some of these operations are benefiting companies connected to her. Do you realize that?" There was silence. Claire imagined Edward there, trying to process information he didn't want to accept. "Are you implying that my fiancé is using me?" "I'm saying you need to look at the numbers more closely. And you need to do it before you sign any power of attorney over to her. If you do that, she'll have total control over your assets, including your mother's inheritance." "My mother is sick." She's no longer capable of managing anything. Sick or over-medicated. Sir, forgive me for being blunt, but I've seen cases like this before. People being manipulated, isolated, made dependent, and there's always someone benefiting in the end. Enough! Edward's voice boomed like thunder. You're fired, Robert. Get your things and get out of my company. I will not have you speak about my fiancé that way. Claire heard hurried footsteps, the door opening forcefully. The man in the suit passed her, his face red with restrained anger, but also with genuine concern. He looked at Claire as if he wanted to say something, but just shook his head and left. Edward locked himself in the office for the rest of the day. When Veronica arrived later, he told her about the argument. Claire was nearby, arranging books on the shelf, invisible as always. You did the right thing, honey, Veronica said, running her hand through his hair affectionately. He was trying to create conflict between us. Jealous people do that, but you have me. And together, we'll rebuild everything better than it was before. Edward nodded, exhausted, and Claire saw, with crystal clarity, how the manipulation worked. Veronica didn't need to shout, threaten, or force. She just planted the right ideas, at the right time, in the right person, and she reaped the results with strategic patience. That night, Claire didn't go straight home. She got off at the 77th Street station and walked to Mount Sinai Hospital, where she knew Julia had a friend who worked as a nursing technician. She asked to speak with her privately. Natalie, I need a favor, and I need this to stay between us. The young woman, with a friendly face and curly hair, looked concerned. What is it, Aunt Claire? Is everything okay? I need you to look at these pictures. They're medications an elderly woman is taking. The doses seem really high. I want to know if they're normal. Natalie took the phone and analyzed the images carefully. Her expression changed as she looked at each photo. Aunt Claire, where did you get this? These doses are dangerous. No one should be taking this amount of sedatives, especially an elderly person. This could cause severe mental confusion, loss of consciousness, even a coma if it's overdone. Who prescribed this? A doctor named Henry Taylor. Natalie frowned. That name sounds familiar. Let me check. She tapped on her phone for a few minutes. Found him. He had his medical license suspended 3 years. AGO for improper practices. He was reinstated after a legal battle, but with restrictions. He shouldn't be prescribing controlled substances like this. Claire's heart raced. This was the proof she needed, or at least the beginning of it. Natalie, can you give me a copy of that? The information about his license? I can, but Aunt Claire, if you're involved in something dangerous, I'm not involved. I'm just trying to help someone who needs it. Natalie looked into her eyes and saw the determination. She nodded and sent the documents to Claire's email. Be careful, this kind of thing can get ugly fast. Claire knew that, but she couldn't turn back now. She had gone too far, and Mrs. Martha was counting on her. When she finally got home, it was almost midnight. Julia was asleep. Claire sat at the kitchen table, opened the borrowed laptop her daughter used for school, and began to organize everything she had collected. Photos, notes, documents, information about the doctor. She was building a case file, something concrete that couldn't be easily ignored or denied. But as she worked, a question hammered in her head. When the time came to expose everything, who would believe her? And more importantly, was she ready to face the consequences of challenging people as powerful as Edward and Veronica Miller? The answer came as a whisper in her heart. It didn't matter if she was ready. It mattered that it was necessary. And Claire Davis, the invisible woman who cleaned other people's floors, was about to prove that even the most underestimated people can become a threat when they fight for what's right. Sometimes, the invisible ones are the only ones who see the truth clearly, and when they decide to speak, the whole world has to stop and listen. The rain started falling over New York again the next morning, heavy and persistent, as if the sky wanted to wash away the sins of the immense city. Claire woke up with the feeling that something was about to change, an unease in her chest that wouldn't let her take a deep breath. As she made breakfast, her hands trembled slightly. Julia noticed. "Mom, you've been acting weird. Is something going on at work?" Claire forced a smile. "Nothing major, honey. Just the usual stress." But it wasn't true. She was carrying a weight that grew heavier each day. The evidence she had gathered, the case file she had started to build, it all burned inside her like a secret she could no longer keep to herself. But at the same time, she was afraid. Afraid of losing her job, afraid of retaliation, afraid that her courage wouldn't be enough against such a well-constructed system. When she arrived at the mansion, the atmosphere was different. There were cars parked out front, people moving around with boxes and equipment. Claire entered through the service entrance and found one of the new employees in the kitchen. "What's going on?" "Oh, I didn't hear. Ms. Veronica hired a crew to do a feature story on the family. They're going to film the house, do interviews, show what life is like here. It's going to be published in a major magazine and on her social media. It's a big deal." Claire's stomach turned. Veronica was doing exactly what people like her always do, building a perfect public narrative to hide the private reality. If that story came out, with photos of the mansion, interviews with Edward talking about how happy he was, about how well Veronica was taking care of his mother, it would be even harder to prove anything. Public opinion would be on their side. She hurried up to the 3rd floor, needing to see how Mrs. Martha was. She found the bedroom door closed and 2 women standing outside, blocking the way. One of them was Veronica. "Claire, glad you're here. I'm going to need you to clean the 2nd floor before you come up here. The film crew will be going through all the rooms, and I need everything to be spotless." "But I always start on the 3rd floor. I clean Mrs. Martha's room first." Veronica smiled. But it was a cold smile. "Not today. Today you do what I tell you. My mother-in-law is resting and can't be disturbed. Besides, you've been coming up here quite often. You don't need to. I'm taking care of everything in her room myself." Claire felt the trap closing in. Veronica was completely isolating Mrs. Martha, cutting off contact with even the one person who might notice what was happening. "Ms. Veronica, with all due respect, my job has always included cleaning all the floors. If something has changed, Mr. Edward should have told me." Veronica's smile vanished. "Mr. Edward is too busy to worry about cleaning details. And yes, things have changed, Claire. This house is going to have new staff, new rules, a new organization, and anyone who can't adapt will have to find another job. Am I being clear?" The threat hung in the air like toxic smoke. Claire lowered her eyes, feigning submission. "Yes, Miss Veronica, I'll clean the 2nd floor." But as she walked down the stairs, her heart pounded with rebellion. Veronica was tightening her grip, and Claire needed to act fast before it was too late. She spent the rest of the morning obsessively cleaning the 2nd floor while the film crew moved through the house, capturing every detail. Veronica was radiant, showing off the rooms, talking about the decor, about the wedding plans. Edward appeared briefly, gave a few quick interviews, but he looked tired, out of place, as if he were playing a role he no longer mastered. During the lunch break, Claire seized an opportunity when the crew went downstairs to eat. She ran up the service stairs to the 3rd floor. The door to Mrs. Martha's room was unlocked. She slipped inside. Mrs. Martha was lying in bed, her eyes half closed, breathing with difficulty. Beside her, a tray with leftover food and again the medicine bottles. Claire approached and lightly touched the older woman's shoulder. "Mrs. Martha, it's me, Claire." Her eyes opened with effort, trying to focus. "Claire, you came." "I always come when I can. How are you feeling?" "Don't know. Everything's so heavy. Can't think." Claire looked at the bottles. One of them was empty. Her heart sank. "Mrs. Martha, how many pills did you take today?" "Don't remember. Veronica gave them. Said they'd help me sleep." It was obvious the doses were being increased. Veronica was accelerating the process, probably because she felt time was running out. The wedding was scheduled for 2 weeks from now. She needed to ensure Mrs. Martha was completely incapacitated by then. Claire took out her phone and once again photographed the bottles, the tray, Mrs. Martha's condition. Then she held the woman's cold hand. "Hang in there, please. I'm gathering everything I need. Soon, I'm going to expose her. But I need you to hold on just a little longer." Mrs. Martha weakly squeezed Claire's hand, a tear rolling down the corner of her eye. "I'm afraid I can't. You can, you're strong. You always have been, don't let her win. Claire had to run out when she heard footsteps in the hallway. She hurried down the service stairs and back to the second floor, pretending to be arranging towels. Her heart was racing. She was playing a dangerous game, and any mistake could be costly. That evening, after everyone had left and the film crew had departed, Claire stayed a little later than usual, finishing the cleaning of the main hall. Edward was in his office, buried in paperwork and phone calls. Veronica had gone out for a meeting with sponsors. Claire seized the opportunity. She went up to the office and knocked on the door. "Mr. Edward, may I speak with you for a minute?" He looked up from his documents, surprised. It had been years since Claire had addressed him directly. "What is it, Claire?" She entered, closing the door behind her. Her hands were sweating, but she kept her voice steady. "Sir, I need to talk about Mrs. Martha." Edward sighed, rubbing his tired eyes. "What about my mother?" "She's not well, and it's not just her age. There's something wrong with the medication she's taking. Claire, my mother is under proper medical care. Veronica hired the best specialist in New York. That specialist had his medical license suspended 3 years ago for improper practices." Edward's expression changed, becoming more alert, more defensive. "Where did you get that information?" "I researched it, and I found other things. The medications Mrs. Martha is taking, the doses are dangerously high. She doesn't need all that. She's being over-sedated." Edward stood up from his chair, his body tense. "What exactly are you accusing my fiancé of doing?" Claire knew she was on dangerous ground, but she couldn't back down now. "I'm saying that your mother is being manipulated, that there's a plan to isolate her to get her out of the way, and you're being manipulated too." The explosion was swift and fierce. "Enough! You've crossed a line, Claire. You're an employee, not a doctor, not family. You have no right to make accusations like that. Veronica has been an angel taking care of my mother, and you, with these absurd theories, are just trying to cause trouble." "Mr. Edward, I have proof. Photos, documents, information about the doctor. I can show you everything. I don't want to say anything. And if you continue with this, I'll have to take action. Do you understand? You've been warned. Get back to your work and stay out of things that don't concern you." Claire felt tears burn her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. She left the office with her head held high, even though she knew she had just put her job in serious jeopardy. But she had tried. She had given Edward the chance to see the truth. If he chose blindness, then she would have to find another way. When she got home that night, she was physically and emotionally exhausted. Julia knew something was wrong. "Mum, what happened? You look like you got hit by a truck." Claire sat at the table, her head in her hands. "Honey, I did something that could cost us dearly. I confronted my bosses. I told them truths they didn't want to hear." Julia sat beside her, worried. "Are you going to lose your job?" "Maybe. Probably." "And what are we going to do?" Claire looked at her daughter, saw the genuine concern in her eyes, but she also saw something else: pride. Julia was looking at her with admiration. "We'll keep going. I'll find another job if I have to, but I won't regret doing what's right." Julia took her mother's hand. "I'm proud of you, Mom. You always taught me to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. And now you're doing it." Those words gave Claire a strength she didn't know she had. Julia was right. All her life, Claire had taught her daughter about values, about character, about dignity, and now she was putting it all into practice, even if the price was high. In the following days, the tension in the mansion escalated. Veronica was ever present, controlling every aspect of the routine. Claire was instructed not to go to the third floor under any circumstances. A new employee was hired specifically to care for Mrs. Martha's room. Claire felt cut off, isolated, powerless. But she didn't give up. She started using her lunch breaks to seek outside help. She went to a police precinct, tried to file a report, but was told she didn't have enough evidence to open an official investigation. She went to the district attorney's office, but was advised to get more documentation, more concrete evidence. She tried contacting journalists, but none wanted to risk publishing something against such a powerful family without irrefutable proof. With every closed door, Claire's frustration grew. How could an ordinary person, without resources, without influence, fight such a well-oiled machine? How could she make the world believe her when her word was worth so little? It was then that she remembered the feature story. The film crew had recorded hours of footage of the family. What if there was something in there she could use? Some contradiction, some detail that would expose the sham. Claire managed to find out the name of the producer responsible for the story from one of the new employees. She looked her up online, found the website, and sent an email introducing herself as a household employee and claiming to have important information about the Miller family. She didn't expect a reply, but 2 days later, a journalist named Marina got back to her. They met in a coffee shop downtown, far from the Upper East Side, far from any eyes that might recognize them. Marina was a woman in her 40s, with short hair and a sharp gaze. "So, Claire, what do you have to tell me?" Claire took a deep breath and began to speak. She told her everything, about Mrs. Martha, the medications, the doctor with the suspended license, Veronica's manipulations, the control she was taking over the family and the business. She showed her the photos, the documents she had gathered, the notes. Marina listened in silence, analyzing every detail. "This is serious. If it's true, it's a huge story. But you understand that to publish something like this, I need more than photos of medicine bottles and stories. I need official medical documentation. I need witnesses besides you. I need something irrefutable. And how do I get that? I'm just a housekeeper. I don't have access to medical files. I can't get Mrs. Martha out of there to be examined by other doctors." Marina thought for a moment. "There's one thing we can try. In the US, any citizen can report suspected elder abuse, which can trigger an investigation by Adult Protective Services. If we can get them to authorize an independent medical evaluation of Mrs. Martha, we'll have the proof we need. But that takes time, and I don't know how much time she has left. Then we'll have to speed things up. I'll write a preliminary piece based on your information, without naming anyone yet. I'll publish it on an investigative blog I run. If that creates enough pressure, it might force someone to act. But Claire, you need to be aware that when this comes out, you will be discovered, and the consequences could be severe." Claire looked at the coffee cup in front of her, thinking of everything she had to lose. Her job, her stability, maybe even her safety. But she also thought of Mrs. Martha, alone in that room, being slowly erased from her own life. She thought of Edward, blind and manipulated. She thought of all the silent injustices that happen every day because people are afraid to speak up. "I'm aware, and I accept the risks. Write the story." Marina extended her hand, and Claire shook it. It was a silent pact between two women who believed the truth was worth defending, no matter the cost. 3 days later, the story was published on the blog. It didn't name names, but it described a very specific situation. A wealthy family matriarch being over-medicated by an ambitious future daughter-in-law, with the complicity of a doctor with problematic history. The details were precise enough that anyone who knew the Miller family would recognize the story. The reaction was immediate. The blog went viral on social media. Elder advocacy groups shared it. Lawyers commented on the legal aspects. And the DA's office, pressured by public opinion, decided to open a preliminary investigation. When Claire arrived at the mansion the next morning, she walked into a war zone. Veronica was on the phone, screaming at someone. Edward's face was red with rage, and 2 lawyers were in the living room, trying to do damage control. Veronica saw her, and her eyes blazed with fury. It was you, wasn't it? You gave that information to that journalist." Claire didn't deny it. "Someone had to speak up. Someone had to defend Mrs. Martha. You bitch! You have no idea what you've just done. I'm going to sue you for defamation, for invasion of privacy, for everything I can. I will destroy you and your family." Edward stepped forward, but his gaze was different. There was doubt in it. For the first time, he was actually considering that maybe, just maybe, Claire was telling the truth. "Veronica, calm down. Let's handle this civilly." "Civilly? This woman just publicly slandered us. She needs to pay for this." One of the lawyers intervened. Actually, if the allegations are true, you're the ones who will have to answer for them. The DA's office has already requested access to Mrs. Martha's medical records, and they're sending an expert to evaluate her." The silence that followed was deafening. Veronica turned pale. Edward looked at her, and Claire saw the exact moment the realization began to dawn on him. All the pieces he had ignored, all the signs he had chosen not to see, started to come together in his mind. "Veronica," he said, his voice trembling, "tell me this isn't true. Tell me you didn't do anything to my mother." But Veronica couldn't answer. Her silence said everything, and there, in that room, thick with tension and unspoken truths, Claire knew she had made the right choice. Even if it cost her everything, it had been worth it. Because sometimes, courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about being afraid and doing what needs to be done anyway. And Claire Davis, the invisible woman, had found a courage she never knew she had inside her. A courage that was about to change everything. The silence that fell over the mansion after Claire's revelation was as heavy as lead. Edward looked at Veronica as if he were seeing her for the first time, really seeing her, without the filters of infatuation and manipulation. She, in turn, had lost her confident, controlled posture. Her eyes darted between the people in the room, calculating, trying to find an escape. "This is absurd," she finally said, but her voice faltered, losing the firmness it always had. "A disgruntled employee making up stories because she's about to be fired. Edward, honey, you're not going to believe her, are you?" But Edward didn't answer right away. He looked at Claire, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time in all those years. "Claire," he said, and there was something different in his tone. "Are you sure about what you're saying? Because if you're wrong, the consequences for you will be terrible." Claire stood her ground, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. "I'm sure, Mr. Edward, and I have proof. Everything is documented. Every time I saw unlabeled medicine, every change in Mrs. Martha's condition after Veronica's visits, the times, the doses, it's all recorded." One of the lawyers stepped forward. "Mr. Miller, I strongly suggest we allow the independent medical evaluation. If there's nothing wrong, this will clear everyone's name. But if there is something, the sooner we find out, the better." Edward nodded slowly, as if waking from a long, confusing dream. "Fine. Do the evaluation. Now." Veronica tried to protest, but he cut her off with a wave of his hand. "No. If you've done nothing wrong, there's no reason to object, unless you have something to hide." The next few hours were a whirlwind. The DA's office sent a medical team that arrived at the mansion, accompanied by social workers and a legal representative. Claire guided them to the 3rd floor, her heart tight with worry about what they would find. Mrs. Martha was in bed, once again in a state of semi-consciousness. The doctor who examined her, Dr. Patricia Mendez, a serious woman with graying hair, conducted a thorough evaluation. She drew blood samples, checked the medicine bottles, and meticulously noted everything. After nearly 2 hours, she came down to the living room where everyone was waiting. "I need to speak clearly and objectively," Dr. Mendez began. "Mrs. Martha Miller is in a state of excessive sedation. The levels of controlled substances in her system are extremely high, inconsistent with any reasonable medical treatment. Furthermore, the combination of substances found could cause severe and permanent neurological damage if use continues." Edward sank heavily into a chair, his face in his hands. "My God, my mother. She needs to be admitted to a proper hospital immediately," the doctor continued. "We need to perform a controlled detoxification and assess the damage. The prognosis will depend on how long she has been under this improper treatment." All eyes turned to Veronica. She was pale, cornered. I was just trying to help. Dr. Taylor said these medications were necessary. He's a doctor, I trusted him." "Dr. Henry Taylor?" Dr. Mendez asked. "He had his medical license suspended for 3 years for this very reason, improperly prescribing controlled substances. How did he become Mrs. Martha's physician?" Veronica couldn't answer. Edward stood up, moving toward her. "How, Veronica? How did you specifically choose a doctor with that history? It was intentional, wasn't it?" "Edward, No!" he shouted, and it was the first time Claire had ever seen him completely lose control. "Don't try to manipulate me again. I was a fool. I let you into my life, my home, my family. I gave you access to everything. And you used it to hurt my mother. Why? For money? For power?" Veronica's tears were real, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of rage at being caught. "You never saw me as an equal, Edward. I was always just the pretty girlfriend, the influencer, the one who was good for photos. But I wanted more. I deserved more. And your mother was in the way. She always suspected me, always tried to pull you away from me. I had to neutralize her before the wedding." "Neutralize?" Edward's voice was thick with horror. "She's my mother, a person, and you treated her like an obstacle to be removed?" The representative from the DA's office intervened. "Miss Costello, everything said here is being recorded. You are aware that you can be held legally responsible for elder abuse, assault, and potentially other crimes?" Veronica didn't answer. She simply stood up, grabbed her purse, and walked toward the door. But before she left, she looked at Claire with pure hatred. "You destroyed everything. I hope you're happy." Claire looked back, not breaking eye contact. "I saved a life. That's different." When Veronica left, she took the charade she had so carefully constructed with her. Her social media life would collapse in the coming hours. Sponsors would pull out. The public, who had so admired her, would turn against her, and the legal consequences would be unavoidable. Mrs. Martha was transferred to Mount Sinai Hospital that same afternoon. Claire asked for permission to ride with her in the ambulance, and Edward, in a surprising gesture, agreed. "You were the only one who truly cared." "For her," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "The only one who saw what I refused to see. I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to thank me, Mr. Edward. Just take good care of her now." At the hospital, the doctors began the detoxification process. It was delicate, even dangerous. Mrs. Martha's body had grown accustomed to those high doses of sedatives, and withdrawing them abruptly could cause complications. But the team was experienced, and slowly, over several days, they began to taper the medications. Claire visited every day after work. Edward didn't fire her. On the contrary, he asked her to stay on, but now with genuine respect. The mansion felt different, quieter, darker, as if ashamed of the secrets it had kept. It was on the 5th night that the miracle happened. Claire was sitting by Mrs. Martha's bed, holding her hand, when the older woman's eyes opened. Not the glazed, confused look from before, but a clear, present, conscious gaze. "Claire." The voice was weak, but it was Mrs. Martha, the real her. "I'm here, Mrs. Martha. I'm here. You saved me, didn't you?" Tears streamed down Claire's face uncontrollably. "You saved yourself by being strong. I just helped." Mrs. Martha squeezed Claire's hand with more strength than seemed possible. "You risked everything. Your job, your safety, your life. For me, an employer you barely knew. I knew you well enough. You always treated me like a person, like a human being, and not all bosses do that. My son, he's here. Do you want to see him?" Mrs. Martha nodded. Claire went out to get Edward, who was in the waiting room, his face marked by sleepless nights and a guilt that was eating him alive. "She's awake and she's lucid." Edward practically ran to the room. When he saw his mother awake, truly awake, he fell to his knees beside the bed and cried like a child. "Mom, forgive me. Forgive me for not believing you, for being so blind, for almost losing you." Mrs. Martha ran her hand through her son's hair. "You were manipulated, my son. She was good at it. But now you've learned. Now you know that all that glitters is not gold, and that the most valuable people are sometimes the ones who stand out the least." Her eyes turned to Claire, who was discreetly backing away to give them privacy. "Claire, don't go. You're part of this family now, more than many people who share our last name." Mrs. Martha's recovery took weeks. Tests showed that, miraculously, there was no permanent neurological damage. Her body, strong and resilient despite her age, had held on. But the emotional scars would take longer to heal. The fact that she had been betrayed like this, manipulated in her own home, left deep marks. Edward, for his part, underwent a complete transformation. He stepped back from the business for a while, leaving trusted partners in charge, and dedicated himself to caring for his mother and rebuilding his life. He publicly called off the wedding, issued a statement explaining the reasons, and faced the media with honesty. It was difficult, even humiliating, to admit he had been deceived, but it was necessary. As for Veronica, the scandal completely destroyed her public image. She lost contracts, sponsorships, and followers. The DA's office filed charges against her for elder abuse and fraud. Dr. Henry Taylor had his medical license permanently revoked. Both would face long legal battles and have to answer for their actions. 3 months later, when Mrs. Martha was finally discharged and returned home, the mansion was different. Edward had dismissed all the new staff Veronica had hired and kept only the long-time employees, those who truly cared about the family. And he did something that surprised everyone. He called Claire into his office for a talk. She entered with a tight feeling in her chest, still not used to the new dynamic. "Claire, please sit down." She sat in the armchair that was once forbidden territory for someone like her. "I've been doing a lot of thinking these past few months," Edward began, "about values, about what really matters, about the people who make a difference in our lives. And I've come to a conclusion. You shouldn't just be an employee in this house. My mother trusts you. I trust you. And you've proven to be more loyal and honest than people I considered to be above you in social status. Mr. Edward, let me finish. I want to offer you a different position. House manager. A salary 3 times what you make now. Benefits including full health insurance for you and your daughter. And a stipend for her education. Julia wants to go to medical school, right? We can help with that too." Claire was speechless. Tears filled her eyes. I don't know what to say." "Say yes. You deserve this. And so much more." "Yes, I accept. But only if one thing is clear." "What's that?" "I don't want special treatment. I want to earn my place. I want all the employees to be treated with respect, not just me. Because that's exactly what motivated me to fight. Seeing people treated as disposable. And that needs to change." Edward smiled, and it was a genuine smile. "You'll be a better manager than I ever was a boss." In the months that followed, life in the Miller mansion found a new rhythm. Mrs. Martha fully recovered her lucidity and vitality. She became actively involved in the family's life again, including business decisions, where her experience was invaluable. Edward became a more humane, present man, more aware of his privileges and responsibilities. Claire, for her part, flourished in her new role. She managed the house with efficiency and compassion, implemented new rules that guaranteed dignity for all employees, and became a bridge between the family and those who worked for them. Julia got a scholarship to a private school thanks to the Miller family's help, and was on the right path to achieving her dream of becoming a doctor. But the most significant moment came one Sunday afternoon when Mrs. Martha gathered Edward and Claire in the living room. "I want to make an announcement," she said, with that look that showed she had made an important decision. "I'm changing my will. Claire, you and Julia will be included as beneficiaries, not in amounts that will drastically change your lives, but enough to ensure security and opportunities. It's the least I can do for the person who saved my life." Claire tried to protest, but Mrs. Martha raised her hand. "It's non-negotiable. And what's more, I'm creating a fund for the household staff. Every employee who works with us for more than 5 years will be entitled to a pension upon retirement. I want the people who dedicate their lives to caring for us to have dignity when they can no longer work." Edward agreed immediately. It's the right thing to do. It should have been done a long time ago. That afternoon, as the 3 of them talked about plans and the future, Claire looked out the window at the mansion's garden. The same flowers, the same trees, the same fountain, but everything looked different now, because it wasn't the place that had changed, it was the people. She thought about her journey, from an invisible housekeeper to a woman who had faced power and won. Not because she was stronger, smarter, or more prepared, but because she had something that many people lose along the way: courage. The courage to see injustice and not turn away. the courage to risk everything for what was right, the courage to believe that her voice, however small and quiet, had power. And it did. Because in the end, it doesn't matter how much money you have, how much power you accumulate, how many followers you gain on social media. What matters is the kind of person you are when no one is looking. It's how you treat those who can offer you nothing in return. It's whether you have the courage to stand up for what's right, even when the whole world seems to be against you. Claire had learned that being invisible doesn't mean being powerless. Sometimes the most underestimated people are the ones who have the clearest view of reality. And when they decide to speak, when they decide to act, they can move mountains. The story of Claire Davis wasn't about a perfect hero. It was about an ordinary woman who made an extraordinary choice, who decided that some values are priceless, that human dignity is worth more than any job, any financial security, any comfort. And in the end, that choice didn't just save Mrs. Martha. It saved Edward from a life built on lies. It saved Claire herself from an existence of silence and submission, and perhaps in some way it even saved Veronica, who would now have to face the consequences of her actions and maybe find a path to redemption. Because that's the most powerful thing about the truth. It can't be hidden forever. Sooner or later it comes to light, and when it does, it changes everything. As the sun began to set over New York, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Claire allowed herself a moment of gratitude. Gratitude for having survived. Gratitude for having made a difference. Gratitude for having proven, not just to others but mainly to herself, that an ordinary woman can do extraordinary things when she has courage, determination, and a heart that refuses to accept injustice. The Miller mansion still stood, majestic and imposing. But now, within its walls, lived something far more valuable than money or status. It housed respect, dignity, and above all, humanity. And it all started with an invisible woman who decided to be seen, who decided her voice mattered, who decided that some battles must be fought, no matter the cost. Claire Davis had won, not just against Veronica, not just against an unjust system, but against the very idea that people like her had no power, no voice, no impact. She had proven that idea wrong, and in doing so, she had become something far more powerful than a simple employee. She had become an inspiration, a living testament that courage can come from the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the people who least expect to change the world are the very ones who do. Her story was a reminder to all who would hear it. No matter how small you feel, how invisible you may seem, you have within you the power to make a difference. You just need the courage to use it. And Claire had used it. With wisdom, with persistence, with a love for justice that could not be bought or silenced. As night fell over New York and the city lights began to twinkle like stars on the ground, Claire smiled. It was a peaceful smile, from someone who had done what needed to be done, from someone who could look at herself in the mirror and be proud of the woman reflected there. She had started as a shadow, but she ended as a light that illuminated the dark corners of a mansion full of secrets. And in doing so, she also lit her own path, proving that even in the most unlikely places, hope can blossom, and that sometimes all the world needs is one person brave enough to say no. No to injustice, no to manipulation, no to complicit silence. Claire had said no, and in doing so she had said yes to something much greater, to dignity, to truth, and to the transformative power of human courage.